Thank you. Thank you, thank you. It's amazing what gets up in front of you after such an introduction. I want to thank the people who organized this Sales Congress. I really feel it's long overdue, and I'm hopeful that we'll have many more. I think I'm supposed to talk about the industry, and my first comment would be that we spend a lot of time in our industry talking about products and studying products. We don't spend nearly enough time talking about sales strategy and the methods of selling. So I'm delighted that we're starting these congresses again and doing that again. Looking at the industry, I think demutualization has been a major factor and affected all of us, certainly the companies. I think what it has done that's not, in my opinion, a very positive thing is it's created a very short-term quarterly result mentality, which doesn't play very well with the long-term nature of the planning and the work we do. So it's a challenge, and the lower interest rates these days have really aggravated the situation considerably. We see a lot of short-term thinking, I think, in our industry, which you don't see, for example, in the US, Northwest Mutual, one of the top companies, and a mutual company, has come out with their new strategic plan last year, which was they're going to be approaching 20 to 30-year-olds because those are the people who are going to be very successful prospects 20 years from now. So we're thinking one quarter to the next, and they're thinking 20 years ahead. And I think ours has to be the kind of industry where we're all thinking 20, 30 years ahead, because that's the work we do, isn't it? So I think we have to have much more long-term thinking as a start in the industry. The companies, of course, have bought and sold each other. There aren't as many as there used to be. A lot of them has changed. When I was much younger, I used to analyze insurance companies, figuring that that was very important for the client to know what he was getting, what the culture of the company was, what their financials were like, and now they've all bought and sold each other, and some of those that were bought again. So the company that we sold isn't necessarily the company that is servicing the client right now. And sometimes, I'm sure you find the same thing, we find ourselves explaining to the company how the product works, because it's not basically their original product. In any event, I'm hopeful that the pendulum theory will work again, and it goes from one extreme to the other, as it always does. From a marketing point of view, I think a lot of the companies have become product manufacturers, and they seem to be heading in that direction. Two of them, of course, still have agency forces, the rest don't. And I think the bottom line from the client's point of view is not very positive. But from our point of view, it's extremely positive, because the one thing that has continued throughout and is still there for the clients we sold years ago is us. And that's why I've said many times, and will say again, that the particular product you sell the client is not necessarily as important as your telephone number. Because when they have a problem, they don't call the 1-800 number, don't they? They call you, and they expect you to handle it. And from our point of view, I think that's an extremely positive factor, because as long as we can maintain our relationship with the clients, and I think we've got it made, and no matter what the companies do at the top level, back and forth, whatever new ones do or don't come in, I think it's our relationship with the client that's the basis of the whole industry, and I'm hoping that will consider. Now, looking at the sales process, Lawrence asked me to say a few steps about that, and we have 10 minutes, so we can't say too much. But there's one factor I'd like to talk about, because I think it's the one single factor that exists in the sales we make and doesn't exist in the sales we don't make. And I think that single factor is control. It's not that we control the client, but think of the sales you make, think of the sales you haven't made recently, and I think you'll see when you didn't make the sale, you didn't control the sales process. The client controls the sales process. So while we don't need to control the client, I think we do have to get control of the process as best we can, because the client really doesn't know that much about the process, does he? He's putting us in the same category as buying a chair or a table or something else. He doesn't put us in the category of a doctor or a lawyer or a long-term relationship. Doctors and lawyers at the top level don't have people looking for the cheapest. And we sometimes have clients who do, although I don't really think, as I've said before, I don't think in our business there is a cheapest. You don't know until you cash out or die or something changes what would have been the best product to buy. I think we're betting, based on our recommendation, we're betting on the percentage chances of things happening, which they most of the time do, but very often they don't. So I think we have to concentrate on adjusting our relationships with our client from product selling to relationship building. And I think the product sale has to come later. We have to be professionals and put ourselves and our own thinking in the category of professionals. And we're professionals, but we have to sell. Many years ago, there was an article on what made a great salesman. And I once visited the Association of Companies in Hartford and said, "You're designing aptitude tests. What are you checking for?" And they said, "Oh, we don't know." I said, "Well, what do you mean you don't know what makes a successful salesman?" They said, "No, we don't know." But then there was an article some years ago, which I think I happen to agree with. I don't know if you will. But they said that the successful salesman has the right balance between empathy and killer instinct. If you have too much empathy, the client sells you. If you have too much killer instinct, you antagonize the client. But if you have that right balance, then you've got it made. And I think looking around, you can be tall or short, thin or fat. You can still be a successful salesman as long as you keep those two things in balance. I think, too, we've got to spend 80% of our time talking to the client about their problem, not about our product. And I think when we were taught to spend too much time on our problem. And in other words, how we dress, how we look, what we say. And I think the key is we have to concentrate on the client, and the spotlight has to be on the client, not on ourselves and not on our product. So the way I think of the process is it's like a funnel, that we get all the facts and figures and opinions and everything at the large end of the funnel, but then we have to reverse the funnel and narrow it all down so we get into the sales process and the killer instinct part of it. I think the clients just have a surface understanding, really. They don't really understand the product, although today they have access to all the facts, all the figures. They don't need us for insurance information, do they? But they do need us for our judgment, for our experience, for our recommendations, and for our time. Most clients would rather play golf than study for 3 or 4 hours a week and learn everything about planning and insurance. That's not first on their agenda. And I think that's where we come in. So I think we're more important than we ever were to the clients. So I think Warren Buffett put it very well, as he always does. He said, "You never know who's swimming naked until the tide goes out." And I think the tide is going out. So we have to figure out exactly where we want to be, exactly what we want to do, exactly how we want to do it. And I think we have to get away from product selling and get much more to consulting, get more to their side of the table so that we're helping them buy the insurance that's right for them rather than selling them. What happens is they get into the product crouch, as I call it, which is it's the buyer-seller crouch, so that they're arguing with you, which they'd rather do than face the fact that it's their problem. It's not our problem. It's their problem. And I think when they get into a discussion or argument with us, they don't have to look at their problem. They're too busy arguing with us. So I think we've got to get much more into a consulting mode than into a selling mode, which isn't to say that you don't have to sell at some point. The killer instinct has to come in. But I think it doesn't have to come in early, and it doesn't have to come in always. And we have to get away from the artificial answers to objections, as an example. You know, when I was trained 100 years ago, you were trained to trick your way in, answer all the objections, and then you had a hard sell close, right? The medical close, rates are going up. We had all these tricky closes. And I think that's not the way people are looking to buy today. So I think that has to go out the window, and we've got to get into a consultative process. So that's my major message, Lawrence. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll be around and we can talk.